Hey, what is going on YouTube? Aaron here. We are back, ladies and gentlemen, and we have got a special one for you guys today. We rack up a massive combined damage total in this one. I'll probably throw it in the clickbait on the thumbnail, but just know that it is between two players. I don't want to see any comments like, well, you actually didn't get that total amount of damage at the end of the game. So yes, it was between myself and Mr. Airsoft Alphonse. You guys probably know him. He is a fellow YouTuber, not in Warships, but he has a small little channel there for his airsoft content. But he loves to play Warships, and we joined up forces here. He was in the Christopher Colombo, and we're probably in two of the best ships tier for tier. And guys, we fight tooth and nail to try and carry this team, but well, just stick around to the end to find out what happens. Now, we are, of course, here on Tears of the Desert. Domination, thank goodness it's not Epicenter. It's just, I don't mind Epicenter, just some people don't really know how to play it, especially when your destroyers avoid the capture point. The game is just pretty silly. But I want to teach you guys a little bit of a lesson here. You saw we had the HE loaded, and of course the HE on this boat is absolutely disgusting, especially with certain commanders. But we saw that Ibuki was pushing rather aggressively in. So instead of sort of wasting one HE salvo that could have gotten, 8k damage in a fire, we switched to the AP here. We turned broadside. We can see that Ibuki's plane is still pretty close, and I honestly thought he was behind the island here, but the plane had actually pushed forward. We become detected. He is flat broadside. We lead a shot, and what do we get? It looks beautiful, and it would have been if I didn't get 9 overpens. Listen, overpens are a mechanic of the game, but sometimes it just feels like it's all working against us. But regardless, we did get a beautiful salvo, 10k off of him. Imagine we hit 10 out of 12 shells. Imagine if 2 or 3 of those had been Citadels, but regardless here, this Montana is pushing rather aggressively as well, so we're going to have to get out of dodge. While the Ibuki, or the Zao rather, does have some decent armor, we are not going to stand up to 2 battleships and another Japanese cruiser if we get focused. But thank goodness Alphonse was our teammate, because he did push in the Colombo, popping his smoke screen, but also shooting, so probably giving away his concealment. And you can see that those battleships are now focused on him. Even with one other division mate, it just makes this game so much more bearable in terms of, you're having a teammate that you know is going to have your back. If I was alone on this flank, I might already be dead. Now, of course, I would have played it a little bit differently. And here is just Alphonse must have gotten the RNG that I did not, because a slightly angled. Now, of course, the Italians have those slightly better AP, penetration angles. But he gets the absolute yeet on that Ibuki, who probably just YOLO'd in to try and get his torpedoes off. While this ship does have torpedoes, and very good ones at that, trying to play this thing as a destroyer is just the wrong way to go about it. And I know this because that's how I used to play these ships. When my first tier 7 ever in this game was the Mogami, and while I would say decent with it, I would always try and get my torpedoes off. And if you know anything about the angles of these boats, you pretty much have to expose near full broadside, and that's what that Ibuki did, and you can see it didn't really work out for him. That being said, you can easily get these torpedoes off in this kiting position here, and this ship excels, and I mean excels, when ships chase you. This is one of the best, kiting cruisers in the game. Now, unfortunately, because of its strong HE and in a decent reload, as well as its complement of torpedoes, you don't have any other utility besides your hydroacoustic search to really deal with destroyers. So just something to keep in mind, especially when destroyers are spotted, in a ship like this. You definitely want to shoot them, because like we mentioned, you don't have radar or really the speed to, such as potentially the Italian cruisers might, or maybe even the French cruisers, to chase destroyers down. So just keep that in mind. So as a result of this, it is your responsibility to cause ultimate havoc to battleship players, making them just hate you to the core with the HE spam. And again, AP when applicable. Sometimes when I get a fire or two, I will just leave the fire burning there and then switch to the AP, such as we have done, especially when a ship like this is going to show you broadside. On top of that, as you can see, we've been shot about 6 or 7 times now. It is your responsibility to attract a little bit of damage. Now, this is a fine line, just like we've talked about with most things in this game. You don't want to be caught out and lose half of your health in one salvo, but also you don't want to be hiding behind an island the entire game, spamming at 20 kilometers, because then you leave your battleships out to dry, and especially if you don't have a radar and a way to deal with destroyers effectively, you need to be supporting your other ships in a fashion like that. Now, the armor scheme is decent, but you can get a lot of those plunging citadels, so maintaining, your throttle, such as we've done here. These battleships have have shot us, multiple shots at long range, and they've only connected about 5,000 worth of damage. So you can run these ships as agile builds, but I truly think it's a waste if you're paying attention to your positioning and throttle jockeying. You don't really need that much in terms of the rudder. Now, that's not to be said that you can't run them that way. I know some people who run them very successfully that way. However, I find myself overcorrecting, especially with that rudder sometimes, and I'll end up leading into shells that I normally, necessarily wouldn't have. A lot of players like to use auto aim, and when you catch them doing that, you can just slightly adjust the throttle there. But let's go ahead and get back to the game and the strategy. And there's 2 points I want to talk about. Number one, you can see that a destroyer has worked his way all the way through the middle and is now capturing the Bravo cap. So something to keep in mind. On top of that, you can see that we have a destroyer in the cap here. We have won our side, in the face of 4 or 5 adversaries. There's a cruiser back there, as well as 3 battleships on top of the Ibuki that we have already eliminated. And I also want you to take note of the position of our ships, because this is something I talk about. It's the triangle offense or the triangle theory or whatever you want to call it. But we have a destroyer spotting out front, we have Alphonse to the right, and we have me to the left. And what this does is it corridors the enemy into making decisions, right? They either have to focus on me and they give up a little bit of angle to Alphonse. They either have to focus Alphonse and push away from me, which allows me to spam. So I see a lot of people, especially in divisions, group up, and it just removes any sort of advantages you may have. Now, of course, if you're getting attacked by planes or something with a very unique scenario like we talked about, then yes, you can group up. But in this situation, and most situations, you don't want to do that. But here is another situation we have to deal with. That Kaba, which was the destroyer that got B, is now pushing his way over to us. Now, he was either detected by a plane or something there briefly, so we're going to try and sneak up on him. We launch some torpedoes preemptively in the channel. We become detected, and that is when the Kaba becomes detected as well. We aim a pretty decent shot there, connect 9 out of 12 right on the front, eliminating half of his health. So we definitely gave him a bad day. He probably wasn't expecting to get yeeted when he rounded that corner, but he smartly kind of reverses there. Like I said, I'm not exactly sure why he stopped. He was probably running a full gunboat build without much concealment, and he didn't want to, give away his position around that corner. But he has put us in a bind because we can't really navigate the waters out here like we did without really having that concealment. Now, the decision I made in the moment, as you can see, is basically just to sit here in DPM, and my reasoning for that was this Kaba was just spotted directly behind us. If he gets in behind us and gets this cap, we are in a world of hurt, considering he already sailed through the direct center of the map. It's one of those where it's like, okay, I don't want to dedicate a whole, mass of ships to the center, and this is one of those unique maps. But in this situation, by completely giving up the center, we let up a huge advantage to the enemy team. And on the contrary, you can kind of see that our destroyer has worked his way in behind. So it's one of those where it's like, yes, there's not an exact way to play this, but by completely giving up the center of the map, it was not a good decision for our team in this situation. But as a result of that Kaba, I can't really push forward, like we mentioned, without him potentially getting in behind us. And that is when we become detected here. So I thought in the moment that he was working his way in to try and get in behind us, to try and torp me. And of course, there's these mass of battleships here. So I am basically handicapped to DPMing in this position. And that is right about the time when Alphonse makes a pretty critical error. Now, of course, he did get the Confederate, and he actually finished with an incredible total of 251,000 damage. Keep that number in your head for the end of the game here, but you can see he got absolutely blapped by another Colombo. He gave up broadside, and it's definitely not his fault, right? There are 4, 5, 6 ships in there. Now, he could have played it a little bit slower, but the advantages of the Colombo are pushing ahead, getting your secondaries, and mass armament of 16 guns on target as quickly as possible. I would honestly put a little bit of blame on our destroyer for being in the position that he is. Now, of course, he is distracting the enemy, but just getting massive flanks behind enemies like that is just a typical Shimakaze play. They just like to get torpedoes on target, and of course that is a strategy as we see Alphonse go down, as well as our Heisen. So now it is a 3-on, well, it was a 3-on-6, now a 3-on-5 with the elimination or trade of that other ship. But here, I'm realizing I don't have time, right? I have to get a few of these kills. We're tied on caps. I either have to push my way into the Charlie cap there, and that is when the Kaba becomes detected on the backside. So definitely a touch of a mistake if we're counting pluses and minuses. But I had no idea what that Kaba was going to do, and if our teammates had played the middle in some form or fashion, then the Kaba wouldn't have got all the way through to our base, and that wouldn't have been an issue. If the Shima had just stayed in the middle, we could have potentially dealt with that Kaba. Now, of course, that is a team-oriented play, and I know that Shima is used to, not having the best teammates, so I get it, I understand. He actually does sort of come in clutch, but we're looking back at these plays, and this is kind of where I get frustrated on stream. Like, if I don't play a near-perfect game in the moment, then people are like always, they'll always criticize you, of course, but it's a result of our team's plays that I was even put in that situation in the first place. Does that make sense? If our destroyers and our other teammates don't leave the middle wide open, then that Kaaba can't get in behind us, and I'm not forced to make the decision to either sit behind that island and wait for him or push ahead and help our team in a different fashion. And again, I don't really have a cruiser that can YOLO rush in there without my hydro running, and especially against a ship such as the Kaaba with a decent amount of health. Yes, I'm sure we could have traded with our torpedoes, but trading with a destroyer in that situation is really, it's not the best play. Especially not now, since they have the point advantage. Now, if we do get the elimination, then we can think about it. But again, these are just, half of these are just made up scenarios. But I want you guys to be aware of them, because I will see destroyers and battleships, just people throw their lives away and trade points in the last minute of a game, which determines a win or a loss, etc. But regardless, here we are just trying to do anything and everything we can in this situation. We're trying to distract these guys from our last remaining battleship at Alpha, as well as provide any support we can for our destroyer, who is out there, doing the typical Shimakaze thing. I will give him credit, he's still alive, which does allow us to get spots and utilize this island cover in this situation. But again, it's one of those things where it's like, he could have been more effective throughout the game, and you will actually see this on the scoreboard at the end. But of course, he's allowed to play however he wants. Sometimes you just wish it was more in a team-oriented fashion, trying to get the capture points, etc. But that is when we notice that Kaaba has gone all the way from our side at sea all the way over to that Alpha cap, and there's not really much we can do for our other battleship in the moment. But what we can do is flood this channel here with torpedoes. We have just gotten the Wither. We are taking our way towards the High Caliber. And for those that did not know, a high caliber medal is 1/3 of the enemy's HP. You also must at least do damage to 4 or more ships, but we've already hit 4 or more ships. So sometimes you'll actually have a high caliber, but you need to hit that 4th ship. But so 1/3 of the enemy damage between Alphonse, 1/3 between myself, and I sort of did a rough estimation. There was about 600,000 damage worth of HP on the enemy team, and we did nearly 80% of it between the two of us. So not exactly sure what our teammates were doing. If you just use the mantra or the standard of trying to do your ship's HP worth of damage, then you will probably, we would probably see less games like this. But here we are in this situation. The torpedoes look absolutely beautiful, and that is when the enemy Schlieffen takes a shot, eliminating my chance of torpedoes. The other Colombo turned out there, but we're going to get some follow-up shots on him. I wish the Schlieffen would have tried to get the Kaaba, but again, he was in a rather rough spot. The Schlieffen finished with a decent XP total, and he did actually manage to get the cap. But there's the Confederate beautiful HE salvo, and there is the High Caliber. So around 165, 170,000 damage is 1/3 of the team's total there. Now, of course, that total can increase because you can heal back nearly all fire damage with the heals, and of course, battleships have some significant heals. But if you do the math real quick, 170 times 2 is what, 340 there, and we got 460. So closing in on what, 85% of the team's total damage. But if you actually look at this situation, we are potentially close to pulling this game back. Now, of course, we don't have the capture point advantage. That Kaaba has actually done a huge, given his team a huge advantage by getting those 2 bases there, and that is when our Shima decides to YOLO a Colombo. No idea. I mean, there's not much time left. He didn't really have much other plays. He's also kind of avoiding, not allowing their points to flow by being in the base. But in 9 times out of 10, you're not going to get that YOLO rush off. But there it is, our final damage total, 209,000 damage. Like I said, I could have potentially made a few different plays. It's, I'm sure some people are going to comment I was hiding in the back, damage farming the entire time, but we played our side, which was definitely the strong side. There were I think 6 ships on that side. We did 460,000 damage between myself and Alphonse there. So we definitely did our job. You just got to have at least 2 or 3 other teammates teammates, and you will actually see the significant difference. I do have to give a lot of credit to the enemy team as well. This is just one of those games where you just got to say GG's. We pretty much did as much as we could in this situation. And to be quite honest, I actually prefer games like this. Now, obviously, I want to win. I'm a competitor. I just, you know, when I'm playing a game, I want to win. That's that's just how I'm built. But I much prefer games like this that are a lot closer. 21-19 for Alphonse there, and 2,031 for me. So both would have been 3K scores on a win, and our team actually did get decent totals there, all things considered. But just a GG's to the enemy team. That's one of those games where at least it's not a swamp, right? So we much rather play those, and a fun game for you guys to watch because I get a high damage total. Now, of course, sometimes you should make winning plays instead of damage hunting plays, but that is the way the cookie crumbles in that situation. But I hope you guys enjoyed that one. We will be giving a bunch more videos this week. I had to switch to my office here, so there's probably a little bit of a reverb towards the end of this video. But anyway, love you guys. I'm out. Peace.